We want to start off by thanking everyone for being here. It's so nice to see so many friends and new faces. And I guess the question we've been getting a lot is how the book came about. And throughout the campaign, it was only 2 months, but it seems like a lot longer, especially now. We saw that there was a lot of disorganization and secrecy, but it wasn't until election night that we realized the infighting and the tension that was really going on. One story that's actually not in the book is that I found out that Sarah Palin was planning on giving a speech, that there was a speech written for her, and I reported that. And I got a frantic call from her press secretary, who was very angry, with two senior advisors in the background yelling that there was no speech ever written, and it was totally incorrect information. Now we know that was wrong, and that was not true. So later that evening, a lot of Palin loyalists were talking to Scott and I and telling us what happened and how there was a speech. But all that information at that point was off the record. And the information throughout the night kept on coming until the next morning. And at one point, Scott and I asked, will the information ever be on the record? And they said, yes. And that's when we decided that this would make a great book. We hope you agree.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Shush said. Thanks to everyone for coming. We really appreciate you all being here, and it's good to see some familiar faces. So we've been really thrilled so far with all the coverage that we've gotten for the book, and most of it is centered around the campaign itself. But what we really want to talk about tonight, just to switch things up a little bit, we want to focus on all of the reporting we did in Alaska. And after the campaign ended, we went up to Juneau and Anchorage and spoke to dozens of people up there and spent several weeks in Juneau. I always joke with Shush, she's sort of become the queen of Juneau. She knows all the state legislators there. They're all best friends now. But we really enjoyed our time there. And I hope it comes across in the book that Alaska is sort of like a character in the book. It's really a unique place. I don't know how many of you have been there, but you can really see what impact the state had on Sarah Palin's philosophy, her demeanor, her upbringing. So the one thing before I start getting into some of the Alaska stuff is that we really tried to bring out in the book that she is a three-dimensional person. And so much of the coverage of Sarah Palin is one-sided. She's really easily caricatured. But what we really want to do is get to the bottom of her character, which is much more complex than either her fans or her foes often believe it to be. For one thing I want to start off by saying about Alaska is that it sort of turned into a joke at some point in the campaign that she was the maverick, and the word was thrown around by Tina Fey all the time. But when you go up there, you really realize that she really did take on the Republican Party in the state, and she actually doesn't have a lot of friends in the Alaska Republican Party, which is really interesting to us. And one of the biggest things she did in the state, of course, was to take on the oil companies, and she essentially raised taxes on the oil companies, which had never been done before in Alaska. Someone just stepping in there and saying, you guys run the state, but I'm in charge as governor. It was really sort of a brave thing for her to do, and we got a taste of the power and influence of the oil companies. It's actually a quote in the book, but I just thought it was really funny when Shush went to interview a representative of the oil industry, and she went in, and with that bright smile on her face that she has right now, and the first words out of his mouth were, if you screw me, I'll screw you. So that's sort of the mentality up there in some respects. And so what I'm trying to say is that she should get a lot of credit for doing that. We also were lucky enough to invite it into the home of Chuck and Sally Heath, Sarah Palin's parents. We met them at the start of the Iron Dog race, and Chuck very kindly took out a napkin and drew a map of Wasilla to show us exactly where their house was. And I don't know if you've seen pictures of it, but it's quite an Alaska home. When you drive in, there's a pyramid made out of antlers, and inside it looks like a taxidermy museum. And when we briefly did run into Governor Palin herself, I mentioned this to her, and she said, "That's what I always say." And they were just really great to us. They shared wonderful stories. And Chuck is a really funny guy, actually. He was talking about how when they were doing the inventory on the clothes and trying to figure out which purchases had to go back to the RNC or what they were going to do with the clothes, Sally got a little concerned and was rushing around trying to get everything back to them as quickly as she could. And according to Chuck, she gave away his only good belt, which actually did belong to him, but she assumed it belonged to the RNC. We thought that was a good one. And my favorite quote in the book, and I think it's just because I met him and I know his personality a little bit from the time we spent with him, was we asked him what his reaction was when Sarah first told him that she was interested in running for mayor of Wasilla, and he said, "I'm sure I wasn't doing cartwheels or anything." I just thought that was really funny. They're a very non-political family, which is another interesting part of Sarah Palin's career, because the question is why she became so interested in politics, which hopefully we answered a little bit in the book. I won't give too much away there.
One thing I should have said when we started is that this is going to be very relaxed, so feel free to come and sit down and fill in the seats so that you don't have to stand. But you can stand if you'd rather. And we're going to, instead of just reading on, we're going to tell you stories, anecdotes, and then take questions. So I hope that's okay with everybody. And feel free if you, in the middle, feel like sitting down. One thing that we found out while we were up there, which we didn't know when we were covering the campaign, is that she really was a media darling before the campaign. After Frank Murkowski, she came in and she was really a breath of fresh air to the press up there who had been dealing with Murkowski, who's been described as grouchy to them. And compared to how she is with the media now and how much she seems to really be so antagonistic with them, that was quite a surprise. She baked them cookies and dropped off cupcakes. I think my favorite part of the book, of reporting on the book, is our time in Alaska and speaking to the legislators there and being in part of the session every day for several weeks. It's so different. Alaska is so different than the lower 48, and being in such it's the smallest legislature in the country. It's 90, the smallest members, and also the shortest session, not only 90 days. And because it's so short, most of the people have other careers. They are commercial fishermen. Many of them used to work up on the oil fields, and they're real characters. So are the sessions. They pass notes. There's a lot of inside jokes going on. A really remarkable part is at the beginning of each session, there are galleys in the back, and that's where I would sit, and we would sit and take notes. And they would introduce the visitors, and that's every day. So about 20 minutes of each session was introducing people in the back, whether it be lobbyists or friends and family, neighbors. And Alaska was so small, and that really showed it. There are people in the galleys that went to high school together, elementary school together. And one day, Scott and I were there, and they introduced us. And we didn't know what to do. Should we stand up? Should we thank them? So we just smiled and went on. And everyone there, at first, I think they were a little confused why we were there so long. Why are they there every day? And then once we got to know these people, it was just an incredible amount of access. You can walk into anybody's office. It's just so different than any other, I think, state legislature.
Who was the representative that had a birthday? I think that's a telling story because it really shows, their mentality towards the governor at the time.
So I was there for the day that it was Sarah Palin's birthday, and it was another state legislator. Her name is Charisse Millett. And somebody stood up in the House session to roast her. And they told everybody that this great story, very colorful story about how she killed a caribou with an axe once. And she says it was because she ran out of bullets. It's very Alaska. And before this story, the House Majority Leader, Kyle Johansson, stood up and said, there are 2 birthdays in the building today. I'm going to talk to you about one of them, and if there's anybody else, they can talk about her. I wasn't sure who it was at first, but then it was made clear that it was Sarah Palin, and nobody else wanted to talk to her. It's interesting, talk about her, but it's interesting before, which we really didn't know so much about either, is that before she became McCain's number 2, is that she allied herself with Democrats. That's who she worked with on her legislation, and whether it be ethics and oil and gas. The Republicans, as Scott said, didn't really get along with her. They didn't like that she raised the oil taxes. So when she came home, it was a cold homecoming, which we were able to witness.
Yeah. And then to bring it back more specifically,